What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome in. It is the first ever ESPN Upstate Zoom party. We even got Marc Ryan to change out of his pajamas after sundown to come in here and talk with us today. Talking a little bit about The Last Dance, episodes 7 and 8 dropping tonight. And it's not only Rob Brown and Marc Ryan, but we've got a pair of listeners who have been involved with us on Twitter. And we'll do these moving forward quite a bit. I think we'll do this to experiment with The Last Dance. And then as we get the return of sports, as we hopefully get into spring football, or, well, I guess what it's going to be called spring football, moving into the fall, and then all the way, as we get special events like the Olympics moving forward, we'll actually do these more often. We want you guys to be involved. So make sure you follow it on all the social media. You can follow me at The Rob Brown Show. Follow Marc Ryan at Marc Ryan on air, M-A-R-C Ryan on air, and of course at ESPN Upstate on all the social media platforms. Keegan Sullivan, Chris Madden joining us, a couple of Hall of Fame ESPN Upstate tweeters that are hanging out with us tonight. Keegan,
P1s, the P1s are in the building. What is going on, guys? Good to see you.
How's it going?
Good to be here.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. So let's jump right into this because I don't want to take up everybody's night. We are doing this immediately after the conclusion of episode 8 of The Last Dance, and I'll start with you, Keegan. We'll go to Chris, and then I'll get Mark's thoughts on this as well. To me, I don't know about you guys, but since the quarantine had started, The Last Dance has been, thus far, the fastest 8 hours in sports entertainment, right? Like, these episodes, they feel like they take forever to get there. I went out today and just kind of rode around and enjoyed my Sunday, but basically make it to 9 o'clock was the only schedule I had set today, was be awake at 9 o'clock for The Last Dance, and then it feels like the episodes are just over that fast. So, A, are you guys having the same experience? And B, what are the 2 or 3 biggest things that you're experiencing when you watch this? Keegan, I'll start with you.
I think for me, it absolutely just flies by, and I think they do a really good job at, it's not so much a narrator kind of telling you what's going on, but it's just people telling their stories, and so that kind of, you're just involved in the conversation, so it doesn't feel like it's dragging on. You're just having a conversation with these people, and so I think that's why it just flies by. But something that I've noticed over the past couple weeks is they do a really good job at letting you decide how you feel about Michael. They show you like the duality of, hey, feel bad for him because everybody thought his gambling had something to do with his father dying, but also you should hate him because he's mean to all of his teammates and he's a real jerk. And so it gives you both sides of who Michael is. And so it really does a good job at allowing you to decide for yourself what you think.
Chris, what about you?
These are by far the fastest 2 hours of my week. It's probably one of the most depressing parts of this experience is that this doesn't last longer.
That describes my dating life, by the way.
As far as the documentary itself, though, I think a big piece of it is that we get to see the raw emotion of Michael, and we get to see a lot of who Michael is behind the on-court stuff. I think we get a bigger picture of who he is if he was playing in the social media era that we're in now. Now we get to see LeBron's kids, and I think I'm a big Chris Paul fan. I get to see Chris Paul and his family interact. We didn't get to see that with Michael, and for me, I was born in '93, so my memories of Michael Jordan are, if I'm being honest, are Washington Wizards Michael Jordan. So I had to go back and watch the Bulls Michael Jordan. And so this is all like reliving what I wish I could have seen as a kid. So this is just brand new content for me. It's the stories behind, I'm a big sneaker guy. The stories behind all the sneakers and the iconic moments are great, but I get to see the little pieces that build up to them. And it's like reading a book that you can't put down. It's like, it is beyond binge watching a series. It's completely captivating, and I wish that they would just keep doing it until quarantine's over.
I don't know if you saw it, Mark, But when Keegan said I was born in 1993, I got about 12 new gray hairs that sprouted up there.
Yo, yeah, I was like, protect his virgin ears from the two of us.
What about you, Mark? So you and I, you and I have talked at work about this, but you've called it before the best thing that's happening as far as sports go in quarantine. Now that we've only got a couple of episodes left, where do you stand on how the experience of The Last Dance for a fan that's older than these two jackwagons?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. Alonzo and I were a big surprise. We were arguing about this on the air because I said, if you're not between the ages of 35 and 45 right now, you missed out on peak Bulls enjoyment during that time. And Alonzo says, what do you mean I missed out on it? I was right there the whole thing. I said, no, man, because to me, I don't know if you guys agree or not, once you're no longer a kid, you've lost a sense of that awe that you had when you were real young, Like I could see something amazing in sports today. I think the only thing that could happen in sports today that would bring me back to the same feeling I had watching that Bulls team would be if the United States men won the World Cup. Like that would give me, I would be weeping uncontrollably like a little bitch if the United States men's national team won the World Cup, but that's the only thing that could do it for me. Once you become an adult, you lose a little bit of that. I actually believe, guys, that this makes Jordan more likable. How many people today talk behind each other's back? How many people today aren't real with you? Michael Jordan, he's real. Yeah, he's an ass, but he's real, and it's a beautiful thing. And last thing I'll say in this opening salvo, Rob, is I thought of you a lot in this episode, man, with all the stuff with his dad. I thought about you quite a bit. Now, a weird fact about my life, there's been a perfect storm of events where I've never actually been to the funeral where you're wearing all black and the hearse comes in. I've never been to one of those. Isn't that odd? In my whole life. The event that I was at for your father, Rob, was that a wake?
No, you were at the funeral itself. You came to the church, right?
I was at the church.
Yes.
So, and when you guys put the sunglasses on, that was the funeral?
That's the
only funeral I've ever been to in my life, man. Was your dad's funeral. I was thinking a lot about you and, how you just went through the 10-year anniversary of your father's passing. And then I'm watching MJ, and I felt really guilty because time has a way of warping our memories. And my memory had linked Jordan's dad's death to like him being involved in some bad stuff. And this tonight, it showed me that it could have happened to you or I or anybody. How many times have we pulled off the side of the road because we're tired, we need a little breather, something like that? He did that, he loses his life. There was no tie to gambling whatsoever with him.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'll start by jumping in on that. I had some other stuff to say, but from a personal perspective, so for those of you who don't know me that are watching this, obviously out there across the GSP area, my dad passed away 10 years ago, a couple of weekends ago, and so and Mark, you know this because you and I have had this discussion. I've really been bagging on MJ throughout this whole series, right? Because to me, it's kind of funny that you brought out that discussion of like childhood wonderment. And I think for those of us who were in that, 8 to 15, 16, 17-year-old age range when Mike was at the top of his game, if we're being real, none of us really were concerned about salary caps and money, and none of us really cared about marketing and branding because we love the game. And so we just work under this childhood belief that anybody is playing for love of the game, which is why I actually love, for instance, I love the Olympics more than I like the sports leagues because the majority of folks in the Olympics, they are doing it out of love of the game, right? So you mentioned the World Cup, and I agree with you, Mark, on that account. But for instance, the summer of Michael Phelps, right? Every time Michael Phelps took the pool that year became must-see TV for me because I knew Michael Phelps was doing that, yes, making the endorsements, but Phelps was doing that to be the best in the world at a thing that he genuinely loved to do. So I respect that. But so I've been bagging on Mike because I thought Mike, and I respect the win above all else, win at all cost mentality. But no, punching Steve Kerr in the face because you're mad at Phil Jackson is not okay, right? Like standing there calling your teammates a hoe because they had the audacity to not run up and down the court the way that you wanted to, guy who's not the coach of the team. That's not okay with me. But you're right, and Keegan, you pointed this out. Tonight we kind of got, I thought, to see the vulnerable side of Mike that I had kind of forgot about. I have been looking at Mike for the past 6 episodes as this hard-ass dude who had no emotion other than drive to victory. And tonight, not only did they show the vulnerable side of Mike in 2 ways, by the way, and I'll get to the second one in a second, but when it came to his dad, not only did we get the vulnerable side, but for me, it struck really close to home. Because when I lost my dad, everything that I do, the first thing I think to myself is, what would my old man tell me to do, right? Like, he was a mentor and a guiding force to me. So even, Mark, when you and I were talking about me getting this job, when I started going through the application process and then sending you guys as much material as I could and working to try to earn an audition, and then when I got the audition, every time I took the next step, my first thought was, how would my dad tell me to handle this? And then when I got it, it was like, damn, I wish my dad was here to celebrate. So that moment of Mike laying on the ground in the locker room, hugging that basketball, and you can hear him sobbing over all the sounds in the locker room, man, I got that. I felt that, right? Like, that really struck a chord to me. But the other emotional moment that came out of this, and I don't know if you guys caught it, I sent out a tweet about it on the @ESPN Upstate Twitter handle, was when the interviewer at the very end of episode 1, the interview's talking to Mike, and this is right after they went through the stuff with Steve Kerr and all that, and he says, do you think that something to the effect of, do you think that win at all cost mentality cost you the ability to be called a nice guy? And Mike said exactly what I thought, which is, look, I have this level of expectation about anybody who's going to play with me, and if you don't want to be on this level, then you need to get the hell out. And then he thought about the fact that he is renowned almost as much for being a jackass as he is for his ability to be a basketball player, right? And that was, if you think about it, when he talked about his dad, extensive interview about his dad, we never saw it. I think he's had 10 years to process it, right? And so, again, I lost my dad 10 years ago. I don't cry about my dad anymore. I did for a year and a half. A picture of my dad, I'm bawling, right? But down the road, you learn to process it. I don't think Mike's ever really had to be slapped in the face with the concept of, hey, everybody thinks you're a jackass. Like, everybody in the world thinks you're the greatest basketball player, but also a terrible dude. Does that bother you? And guys, it bothered him. We saw Michael Jordan tear up and say, I need a break. And I don't know about you guys, but that was probably the biggest moment of these 2 hours tonight that I just kind of stared towards the TV. Like, of all the things I was expecting on a night where I knew I didn't know what to expect, that was the least expected part of it.
Yeah, you know what, Rob? Here's the thing. My favorite line in the whole 2 hours tonight was when Jordan said, some people say he's a tyrant, and then he points at the camera and he goes, "That's you, but you haven't won anything." I mean, literally, man, I was legitimately laughing my ass off at that. He said winning has a price. He said leadership has a price. And look, I think at times he was a bully. At times he went way too far. But he got the best out of his teammates, man. And sometimes the ends justify the means. And sometimes I would say that you have to be a jerk to be great, And so I come at this from a little bit different viewpoint. Am I glad that I got to enjoy Jordan not being his teammates? Yeah, I am. But at the same time, like, I really like the guy. Like, I mean, the whole time I've known you, Rob, like I've been viewed as a more abrasive guy than you. And I respect the hell out of you for who you are. And like, I'm okay with who I turned out to be as well. But because my personality, I think, is more like MJ's than yours is, I think I relate to, how hard driving he is and how much of an ass he can be at times, because he just can't figure out another way to get his point across, and his point does get across, and it brought the best out of his teammates. I really like the Will Purdue section where he's like, was he an asshole? Yeah, he was an asshole. A big time asshole. but he got the best out of us in the end. And you wonder if they could have had that level of success if Jordan wasn't the way that he was. Sure. So I don't know, man. I continue to believe you have to be a jerk on some level to achieve that level of success. And I think Kobe had that in him as well.
Let me, so Chris, I want to go to you, Chris, for a second, because you mentioned you're obviously, thank you very much, significantly younger than Mark and I. So I would say you came in probably toward, I'm guessing here, but you tell me, probably toward the tail end of Kobe and the beginning of the LeBron era. And Kobe, like Mark said, Kobe was more Michael. LeBron, I think, is a little more me, if we're using the me and Mark comparisons here. LeBron's not really known for being the guy that goes after his teammates, for the guy that beats the hell out of people. What was your thought as maybe somebody that knew Michael from the very end of his career, learning that Michael Jordan, the guy that was beating the hell out of teammates in practice, reacted the way that he reacted tonight when he got told, hey, man, nobody really likes you as a person. Everybody liked you as a teammate, but not as a guy.
So to put into perspective for you guys, my first basketball jersey, NBA-wise, that I remember owning was a Muggsy Bogues Charlotte Hornets and
nice,
an original Allen Iverson, like 97 jersey.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the number 8 Kobe era, was probably my peak. Like that was when I started focusing NBA. I think Mutombo was still on the Sixers with Iverson. It was a good time to be a basketball fan. It was a lot of fun. I think when I coached varsity basketball for a while, and when I was coaching, I studied Kobe, but I studied kind of the transition between the 8 to 24 time, because I felt like when Shaq left and he changed to 24, there was a lot of the leadership style changed, and it was more Jordan-esque. I mean, if you go back and watch some of the way like they had open practices, he was Michael Jordan reincarnated on that court. I mean, he was in your face. He would curse you out. He would, if you didn't run fast enough on a sprint, he'd go grab you by the jersey and make you do it again. To me, I kind of agree with what Mark said. I think what I've seen, at least from this documentary, what I've seen out of Kobe, and honestly just out of being an athlete through high school and whatnot, those are the type of leaders, if it gets the best out of you, that's what's working. And for Michael, like, I think he got the best out of his teammates. I think if he was the nicer guy, the Scottie Pippen, if you will, during that era between, Jordan's playing baseball, Scotty's the leader, I don't think that they win 3 in a row twice. I don't think they have 6 chips. I think there's some more issues that go on kind of in the middle of that group. I think that's what that team needed. And honestly, I think it may go understated because this is so much about Michael, but I think a lot of the way Phil Jackson let Michael lead this team through his own ways is what made them successful. I think if Phil was too overbearing, Michael would push back too hard. And I think he pushed just enough that it got the best out of his teammates. And I'm trying to remember the movie quote, but it was, if they hate each other, they won't, if they hate me, they won't hate each other that much. It might've been, Remember the Titans, I believe. I think Coach Boone said, if they hate me, they won't hate each other as much. And it's the same type of thing. I think Michael was okay sacrificing them not liking him if it meant they were successful. Because that raw emotion at the end of episode 7, to me, said that's what Michael cared about the most. Michael wanted to win. And it was to the point that that was the first time I've seen emotion, tears coming down his eyes, that like, that's what he wanted more than anything. And I think as you watch this, and I think as I rewatch it, I'm going to see it more in him, that is what he did.
So I want to hear what Keegan has to say too, but just one thing to add to that. I don't think they liked him, but I think they loved him, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I don't think they really enjoyed a lot of the stuff that he did, but they look back at the course of their lives. Why do we know BJ Armstrong? Why do we know who the hell Judd Bushler is? You think we would know who these scrubs are if they didn't play with MJ? Will Purdue, Bill Wennington. We know their names because they played on the greatest team over the greatest era of all time. And when you go outside and you play on your court and as a kid and you pretend to be those guys, Bill Wennington had a role on your team. Will Perdue had a role on your team. Bill Cartwright, B.J. Armstrong. All of these jabronis had roles on your team because of MJ. And I think that's an important distinction to make, Keegan.
Well, and so kind of goes right with what you guys were saying, how in this era of basketball, he was great. But I wonder how successful that would be now, because like you said, LeBron isn't really that way, because as players are so much more vocal now, where in the 90s it was more what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room, where now you have like Draymond Green, who'll talk crap about his teammates. You'll have Kyrie. Like, everybody's so willing to talk to the media. I wonder if MJ played now, if his teammates would be vocal, and that would kind of limit him in what he could do, because he wouldn't be able to have that same mentality. And you kind of saw it towards the end of Kobe's career. He like shifted how he led just because players were complaining, and it harmed his image per se in the media. I wonder what MJ could do if he played now.
So that's a really interesting question. I during the episode tonight, when we were kind of going through, before Mike had his breakdown where the interviewer pointed out to him that he's pretty universal. He was, maybe he's right. Maybe everybody did love him because they brought them up to success, but nobody really liked him. Last night I was watching UFC 249, and I kind of made a joke on Twitter because Tony Ferguson came out, and he has these huge angel wing tattoos on his back, right? And I said on Twitter, I said, there's only one way you can get away as a man with having angel wing tattoos, and that's the ability to beat the hell out of any other man who makes a joke about your angel wing tattoos, because that's everybody, right? I think that's the thing with Michael Jordan. If you are anybody but the best, and I'm not talking about the best on your team, I'm talking the best in the world, end of discussion at what you do, you can't get away with acting like that, right? Like if Michael Jordan was Scottie Pippen, phenomenal player, great player, maybe the second best player in the league for a few years during the Michael Jordan era. Scottie, I think the reason Scottie didn't act like Michael, aside from the fact that he's wired differently, is that even though Scottie was probably the best on that Bulls team at the time, he wasn't Michael Jordan good, right? And if he went out there and he got into the face of, let's say, Steve Kerr or Tony Kukoc and pushes them and says, what the hell's wrong with you? I think all of them can look and go, who the hell do you think you are, Michael Jordan? You know, and you can't get away with that. So I think that's the other aspect of it, is the only reason Mike was that way is because he is the only player that could be that way. There's only been, to me, there's three guys that have reached that category in the NBA, Mike, LeBron, and Kobe. That's it, right? And you even said, like, Kobe towards the end of his career kind of started to soften up a little bit. And then LeBron is historically known for being well-liked by his teammates, which is why you've got guys all over the league that have wanted to play with him. But I think that Mike, having achieved that level of ability and performance, and on top of the fact that, yeah, you're right, like nobody was tweeting from the Bulls locker room after practice in 1997. That wasn't a thing, right? So Cartwright couldn't get on the Twitter machine and go, yo, Michael Jordan punched me at practice today. What the hell's up with this? I want to trade. You know, that just wasn't a thing. And on top of that, and I think this kind of segues to a point that you just made, Mark, as we talk about Michael Jordan. And that is, if you are on that Bulls team, if you are Steve Kerr, right, you are in the midst of what you know is about to be the greatest period of success in your basketball team. So you have a choice to make. And I think Steve Kerr kind of roundabout talked about it. You have two options. You cannot be treated like crap by Michael Jordan while Phil Jackson, for the most part, sits back and watches, or you can go somewhere and not win NBA championships. Which one of those two things do you pick?
Yeah.
Completely. By the way, you know who I think looked the worst tonight? Who came off the worst? There was one moment, and I was like, man, this guy still has immaturity issues. That's Scottie Pippen. Yeah. I could not believe he said he would, when he chose not to go into the game, that if he could go back in time, he wouldn't change anything. You can't say that, man. You like, all these years later, you can't say that. Okay, the play worked. Tony Kukoc made the shot. Okay, Tony Kukoc was a better shooter than you, And if you can get him an open look, he has a better chance of making that shot than you. That wasn't a jump shot with 1.8 seconds left, wasn't your game, bro. And you can't come out today and say you wouldn't change anything, man. I mean, that was like an I told you so moment. And it just showed me, it's like, good God, man, you're still immature at like mid-50s? You're still immature. All these years later, you're still immature, man.
If anything, that was his moment to save himself.
Yes.
To like save face with at least his teammates, because everyone who watched that played with him was just like, still.
Let's do this, guys. I want to kind of shift for a second because there's two more aspects, two more major topics that got covered tonight that I want to make sure we have time to get in. Mark, I think the first one of the two is probably going to be something that impacted you and I more than the two young bucks over here, and that is when Michael Jordan walked away to go play basketball, or walked away from basketball to go play baseball with the White Sox organization. I remember when that happened. I was 11 years old, and I was a huge I still am. I was a big baseball fan, but that was when I was really kind of starting to develop as a baseball player. And so there was a part of me that was sad because I'd been watching Mike since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And then Mike all of a sudden is going to go play my sport. I was a baseball player better than I was anything else. I loved basketball, but I was a better baseball player. When Mike walked away and went to go play baseball, as a kid, I remember being really overwhelmed by the fact that even Mike wanted to play the sport that I love so much. Even Michael Jordan thought it was a worthwhile pastime to pursue. But there was something about basketball that changed that day. And even though Mike would eventually come back, I remember that first season without Michael Jordan as a fan, just kind of in basketball, I will say this, and this may or may not get me in trouble in the upstate area. Basketball is my number one love. It is my favorite sport. I watch more basketball than football, than anything else. But something about basketball at the professional level changed that day for me, Marc Ryan. I was actually glad to get to see a lot of the baseball people in this documentary say, hey, if Mike would have had another 2 years, he'd have made the major leagues. Because I remember Michael Jordan being terrible at baseball, right? But they kind of showed tonight that he wasn't great, but he was good. And there was just a lot of media spin because I think everybody just kind of assumed Michael Jordan's going to succeed at anything that he does, and that includes baseball. So, Mark, this is probably the one thing about this documentary where I actually viewed Mike in a more flattering light as opposed to a less flattering one, was seeing his baseball career from his perspective and from the perspective of actual baseball people like Terry Francona, who were going, yeah, this guy would have made the league. He was that good. Because I never had that impression of him as a youngster.
Yeah, first of all, I forgot Terry Francona was his manager, and I'm like, man, that was awesome. I mean, that was
wasn't that weird when he showed up?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I was like, whoa. That's like one of my favorite managers in the bigs today, Terry Francona. No, here's what I would say. Michael Jordan was a great baseball player. Tim Tebow is a great baseball player. Are you kidding me? 280 in Double-A for Tim Tebow, 202 in Double-A for Jordan. Hasn't played the game since he was 17. I mean, think of what that's like. If any of us just decided, hey, we're going to go play baseball today, and we're going to give it our all, and we're going to bust our ass, and we're going to practice 10 hours a day, we would not get a hit the entire season, okay? The entire season, we would not get a hit the entire year. And he was able to do that successfully. So I marveled at that. And I never understand the, like, let's make fun of Jordan as a baseball player, Tebow as a baseball player. I don't think people realize just how unbelievably they're performing, having not played it since high school. That is unbelievable. They're playing with people who have done nothing but this the last 20 years of their lives. So it's incredible. The other thing I would mention is there is something about really intense people, right? And sometimes I can be a really intense person. They burn out, right? And we've seen that with Urban Meyer in college football. He just goes. Then he has, like, you know, heart problems and he can't handle it anymore. His family life is suffering, right? And he's got to like get away from it all. He's got to like back away, and then he gets the bug and he comes back and he's awesome again, right? And then he has to go away again. And Jordan is the exact same way. And when you are wired, when you are that high strung and that intense, you can only do things in short bursts. And that's where we all were robbed as fans. We were robbed by Jerry Krause because what GM today would break up that dynasty? And we were robbed by, Jordan needing to take mental breaks because of how hard driving he was to himself and his teammates on a daily basis.
What about you? We'll start with you, Keegan, and then we'll go to you, Chris. But, again, I don't know what you guys know from your personal experience about Michael Jordan's baseball years. I don't know if it had the impact on you guys that it would have for me and Mark and the rest of our AARP membership that is us. But, what's y'all's experience? What are your thoughts on Michael Jordan, the baseball player, before and after seeing tonight's episodes?
So for me, I'm 30. And so I kind of I was young, but I'm actually from Birmingham, Alabama. So I got to see Michael play. And it was like the Birmingham Barons. It was my family's favorite thing to do over the summer. We would always go, and then all of a sudden there were 3 times as many people. The stadium was just electric, and really the entire city was just electric because you never knew. Like, Birmingham's a big city, but where the Birmingham Barons played, or when they used to play there, was right outside in a place called Hoover, Alabama. And Hoover, Alabama is just small enough to where if you see a blacked out Range Rover, like, you knew that was Michael. And so it made the city so much more fun to be a part of. Again, I was like 5 and 6 and 7 years old, but I remember that. And it was just super exciting. And then I was there whenever they filmed the opening scene to Space Jam. And so for me, MJ playing for the Barons was great because, like, I was tied to that city. That means I was tied to Michael. So I had great memories. What about you?
It's interesting. One thing on that, I was told Jordan actually played here. Because the Greenville Braves were the team before the Greenville Drive. They were AA. They didn't have Fluor Field yet, but they played somewhere else in town. And Jordan was here in town. And I can't remember who told me that, but they told me it was absolutely crazy. Can you imagine Jordan being here with as popular as he was? I mean, that would have been nuts.
Well, it's like when Tim Tebow played minor league. He played for, I think, Charleston.
Yeah.
And when he played the Greenville Drive, and it was just a madhouse.
Cool.
Yep.
Chris, what are your memories of Jordan as a baseball player, if you have any?
So I will tell you, I won't lie about my memories. The first recognition of Jordan playing baseball was in the movie Space Jam when I was a little kid.
Oh, okay.
I'm just being honest with you. But as a young kid, though, and I still to this day am a baseball card just guy. Like, I love the old baseball cards and collect them. And so it intrigued me because I was like, Jordan's not a baseball player. I've got to learn more about this. So as I looked into it, I think what you said, Mark, kind of resonates with me. Him hitting in the 200s is unbelievable. And I think back to when I worked in minor league baseball myself. I worked in sports information, and we had guys that played, that was their job. They played for years for us, and they couldn't hit 200 to save their lives. And you talk about hitting 50 runs in. I'm like, I don't think we had 3 guys that could hit 50 runs in. I think I had just finished working there. My wife and I went. It was in Lynchburg, Virginia. Steven Strasburg was on an assignment. And so that's their high single A team. And he was pitching about 5 innings, and that was it. And I just remember the city essentially just stopped. You couldn't get into the stadium if you weren't there 3-4 hours early. And that's a baseball player, much less someone as high profile as Michael Jordan or even Tim Tebow. And I just remember I called and got us tickets to the Strasburg game, and that place was bumping. And that was in the middle of essentially nowhere, Virginia, watching a Major League Baseball player throw a couple innings. But to see Michael Jordan play at any level of any sport, I would pay an obscene amount of money to watch him try to ice skate and play hockey. I can't imagine watching him, a 200 batter, play baseball. That sounds like a dream in and of itself, much less to play for the Bulls basketball.
Well, and something that stuck out to me about that, because this whole documentary has kind of just been showing how individual and almost selfish that Michael Jordan has been. But for him to decide, no, I'm not going to cross the picket line, like I'm not going to go up and play because I want to stand with our guys, really, like, it showed a different side of Michael, because I was watching, I was like, why didn't he? Because he's so me-focused when he plays basketball. Why wouldn't he take his opportunity to play in the MLB? I thought that was super interesting.
Thank God there was a strike. He never would have come back to the NBA, man.
Let's. I want to bring up one more thing, guys. That we got. I think we got tonight more than we've gotten other episodes, or at least from a different angle, right? And that's Mike in one-on-one matchups on the basketball court, right? So we had the discussion about him versus Isaiah a couple of weeks ago. We've gotten him in a couple of spots here and there, but tonight we got mentions of two different rivalries. There was B.J. Armstrong with the Hornets, and then they were talking about the glove, Gary Payton with the Supersonics towards the end of that series. And there were two things that kind of made me laugh. First and foremost, with as many times as we have heard Michael Jordan say, "That's all I needed, then it was personal to me," did nobody call the rest of the league and go, "Hey, you guys probably want to stop talking crap about Mike because all it does is piss him off and make him kill you more"? And then the second thing was the most genuine emotion outside of when he kind of teared up about being told nobody viewed you as a nice guy. The most genuine emotion we got tonight was when they handed him the tablet to listen to Gary Payton, when Payton was like, "Well, I was a great defender, and I was two-time defensive champ, and I was going to lock him down, and blah, blah, blah." And Mike laughs, and Mike hands it back, and he's like, "I had no problem with Gary Payton." You know what I mean? Like, that was such a raw moment of emotion, even if it was Michael being humored by the situation. But I really enjoyed, even though, like I said, the attitude of Michael Jordan is kind of a turnoff to me, I did kind of enjoy them deep diving into some of these one-on-one matchups on the court and the way that they turned Michael Jordan into Michael Jordan, when otherwise in the back 3 years, in the back three-peat, there were maybe some spots where he wasn't really the way he was in the first first three-peat. So I really love the deep dive with him and Gary Payton and how they kind of how he kind of approached it from, "Hey, he pissed me off, so I killed him." I liked it.
You know, it was funny. Like, I'm sure everyone in the league was like, "Don't say anything. Whatever you say, Jordan's going to use as fuel." So George Karl actually did the right thing. You know, he's like, "Oh crap, he's at the same restaurant. I'm not going to say shit," right? And so he doesn't say anything, and then Jordan uses that against him. So you can't win for losing against that guy, man. George Karl did exactly the right thing.
Well, I just want to know. I want to know what LeBradford.
Who was that guy?
I forgot.
Yeah.
About that.
Like, what is he thinking? Sitting at home watching this, he's like, finally, people know it wasn't me. But like the whole Michael in one-on-one thing, if I can kind of make it regional, I think he does the same thing that Dabo does. Dabo clings on to the one thing that the media says negative for Clemson and turns it into, "Hey, this is why we're fighting." But they're Clemson. They don't really have to have a reason to like battle. But Michael Jordan does the same thing. At that level, you have to grab onto anything to give you that little bit of hunger again.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you've heard the term bulletin board material, Michael Jordan and Dabo Swinney must have the biggest bulletin boards in the world, because everything is bulletin board material.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what was it? And I love that you pointed out one guy says nothing to Michael Jordan, and that becomes his motivation. And then they talked about LeBradford. All he said was, "Hey, good game, Michael." Like, that's all. That's what you say after games. And
Rob, he didn't even say that.
Yeah.
He didn't even say that. Jordan made that up.
Yeah, like, so you took the thing that you were supposed, like, that's what we're taught as kids to say to each other, and you put those words in that kid's mouth, and then you destroyed him the next time you played. Like, that again, it's so weird to me, because it's not to me, it's not that that's an unacceptable way to approach the game, right? Because it made Michael Jordan and it's made Kobe Bryant, it's made others, but it's such a foreign concept to me that, because here's the thing, like, and Mark, you and I have talked in the past, right? Like, you and I both want ESPN Upstate to succeed, but you and I also want to, like, we know we're always going to have kind of a competition because that's what teammates do in when they're trying to push a team forward. There's no point where I'm going to go, you know what Marc Ryan called me the other day, when you and I haven't even talked in a week. You know what I mean?
So I think, yeah, Rob, I think the thing, and you and I talked about this before you were brought on, right? And it's like, it's really hard not to be competitive with people you see every day. But if Rob and I are really kind of biting at each other, we're not seeing the forest through the trees. You know, we have heritage competition in this market that has been here for years, and we're kind of the new kid on the block. And so the most important thing for you and I, Rob, and our station is that, yeah, like, man, I want to hear you have a great show, and I want to have that motivate me to not drop the baton and all that stuff. But we've got to maintain focus on the bigger picture, right? Which is kicking the tails of the heritage station in town that talks about one team, and they talk about them a ton, right? So that's kind of the bigger picture there, right?
Because I'm so driven to success, the next time I see you in the office, I'm going to punch you in the face because that's
yeah, there you go. There you go. And I'm not going to say anything to you to try to avoid that punch in the face, and you're going to use that as motivation, right?
Oh, man. So
I got to show you guys something real quick, okay? My college graduation present, right? It was at the time, way back in the year 2002.
Chris, you were still in diapers, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I want to say second grade.
Chris was watching Jordan's baseball career on the TV screen in his mom's womb.
Oh, the monitor in his crib, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, I was putting money on this thing down freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. And then I had still money to pay off on it when I graduated. So the folks paid off the rest of it, and it was my college graduation present. This is the Jordan rookie card.
Wow.
This is the Jordan rookie card, and everyone says you should get this PSA graded. You ever heard of that? PSA graded?
I have it graded.
You do? So I'm too terrified to put this thing in the mail, man. Like I can't, man. Like what if it gets screwed up in the mail somehow? You got to get insurance. That's all I know to tell you. Yeah. So this thing is worth between $3,000 and $4,000 right now, and I estimate it would be about a PSA 7 or 8. It's a pretty good condition card. But you see, this was my college graduation present right here.
That's incredible.
It's pretty cool. I love that thing, man. Of anything I own sports wise, that's the thing that means the most to me. I
love it. So let's move forward to kind of start wrapping this thing up, guys. And we'll go around the horn one more time, and I'll start with Keegan, then we'll go to Chris, and then we'll go to Mark. Now that we've gotten through the second comeback, we've gotten through the gambling issues, we've gotten through Mike's relationship with his father, we've gotten through the baseball era, and it seems to me like really the last big benchmark is just going to be the last dance, the last season. Let's walk it game by game, series by series, all the way through. What are you guys looking for? Because this is it. The next week's the grand finale, the end of the fireworks show. What are you guys looking forward to in terms of the documentary itself, and what sort of closure would you like to have from what we've all agreed has been recently the fastest 10 hours in sports?
For me, I really hope that they don't even touch the Wizards. I hope it with the Bulls. But I am really enjoying, like we talked about earlier, the vulnerability of MJ. And I would love to just hear him say, like, yeah, the championships were great, but I don't know if it was worth it. Or, yeah, it was great, but I'm not sure I'm okay with who I am. Because I feel like that's part of the reason why he's been so distant to the game. As opposed to when Kobe retired, he was courtside for so many things, and he was helping young guns out. And I feel like MJ didn't want people to become him. and that might have been part of the reason why he was so distant. And so I'd like to kind of just hear how he summarizes his career.
Chris?
Yeah, I would pay a dumb amount of money to sit here for a couple hours and just listen to Michael Jordan and possibly Magic Johnson just tell stories of that era and just how they perceive that they are thought of now and what they would change. And I mean, I think towards the end of this, agreed. I don't want to see any Wizard stuff. I don't want any part of that. And I think they've done a good job of towing the line of this being the Bulls documentary, the Michael Jordan documentary. Because just when I feel like it's becoming all about MJ, they flip it back and it's like, here's Pippen and Rodman. Here's this. So it's been great. Personally, from nostalgia, I'd like to hear more about kind of that era of Space Jam. That kind of, it's towards the end of that Bulls run, but there's so many, like, I feel like there's so many side stories, and that's what makes these things so cool, is the side stories from Charles Barkley and seeing Horace Grant's face when he found out his teammate said something about Michael Jordan.
Who looks great, by
those
the way. Horace Grant looks great.
But that's what I'd like to see. I just want to hear more of the things that I can't find out by just Googling on the internet or just, the ESPN ticker. I want to hear the inside stuff. I think that's why we watch these things. And I think as this wraps up, and we know how the story ends, I want to know as my grandfather would say, I want to know the meat and potatoes of the story. I want to know the little bits and pieces that we'll talk about, years down the road. Like, did you know Michael had this going on or this? Those are the things that I like cling to in documentaries like this. And I hope as it finishes that I hope we get to see more of vulnerable Michael. I think we see a lot of that in the newer athletes. I want to know more about how he feels his time was when he was at his peak now. Because even though he's still around, like, he doesn't really share that much. And even though he's involved with the Hornets, he's pretty distant. And so I'd love to know more about what he feels like the way he's perceived from the Chicago natives to the NBA as a whole. Because, when Kobe passed, we got to see a lot of how the younger players in the league that grew up watching Kobe, how they felt about Kobe and their emotions, the raw emotion. We haven't gotten as much of that about Jordan unless, Stephen A. Smith is asking somebody who's better, LeBron or Michael. I want to know kind of more about what Michael feels he's perceived as, and just kind of, where he stands with the game and the young guys now. Because I think there's a lot of opportunity for him to still have a major impact beyond what he's already done for the game of basketball and the NBA.
Mark?
Yeah, you know what? I want to know from Michael, in terms of, like, we can all agree pride is the downfall of man, right? And did he retire because I told you I was going to retire if Phil Jackson wasn't the coach? Does he have any regrets about not continuing with that team, not continuing in some form? I continue to feel like they won 6. It could have been 10. Right? And I continue to feel robbed as a fan by that. And then it's interesting to me to look at how much the criticism truly does bother him. You can see it on his face. You can see it in some of the in-your-face things he still says, right? He's still bothered by that criticism. Charles Barkley criticized him as an executive. He hasn't spoken to Charles Barkley since. That really hurts Charles Barkley to this day. So, lastly, I would really like to hear what he thinks about the game today. Like, how cool would it be to watch the Splash Brothers playoff game with Jordan sitting next to you and hear him say, you see this bullshit? Like, that would never fly in my era, right? Because you could hand check Michael Jordan. You can't hand check any of these guys today. We've heard people say, I think it was Magic Johnson say, he could score 40, 50, 60 points a game if you couldn't hand check him today, right? So I think all of those things are interesting. And yeah, I get it. The today versus yesteryear argument is tired. It's a little bit boring. It's a little played out. But I honestly believe the answer to that would be whatever rules you played by, right? If you played by today's rules, the best Warriors team might win that game. They would get bludgeoned to death, and they would never pick up a basketball again if they played that Jordan's Bull team with the 80s and 90s rules, right? They would never – Steph Curry would be broken in half in that game. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Entirely. Yeah, I think look, I started this documentary at episodes 1 and 2, and I remember coming on and having my discussion at it on the first Monday, and then Mark coming in and saying, hey, Rob did a great segment, and everything he said was wrong about Michael, and let me tell you why. And it was really interesting to me because I was looking at it from comparing Mike from that idolization of my childhood Mike versus now as a 35-year-old and knowing how I expect other adults to act in my atmosphere. The way Mike acted was unacceptable. But the last 2 episodes tonight, they really did, Keegan, and you said it, they kind of pulled out that vulnerable side from Michael Jordan, and they went, we know that we have been putting it in your face how much of a jerk this guy is. But here's this kind of side of him that he really does still have these raw emotions. And I wasn't completely that way because I remember the story from Steve Kerr tonight, right, where he was like, Phil Jackson was trying to calm me down and blowing all these ticky-tack fouls on Steve Kerr. So I went over and knocked the crap out of him, and I said, you want a foul? That's a foul. And then Kerr punched me, so I punched him right in his face. And I'm looking going, I don't understand how adults act like that. And I know, like, in a situation where you're talking about athletics and the competition's up and the testosterone's up, and especially when I got 7 figures riding on the line to make sure I go with this, I get that it's a little different than at a radio station where if I walk up and Mark body checks me into the wall because I didn't do a segment the way he liked it, that HR is going to be in the phone in a minute. There's no HR in the NBA, right? So it wasn't all that way. But I really do hope, especially in episode 10, that I'm assuming Mike kind of looks back over his career, specifically that last season and walking away from the game or walking away from that last championship, knowing that that team was going to be blown up regardless of what his future was. I really do hope we get a little bit more of that that emotionally vulnerable side of Mike Jordan that kind of shows, hey, we know that Mike, the McDonald's, Gatorade, Coke, NBA guy, was this, and now we've kind of blasted you in the face with, no, he really wasn't anything like that guy. Here's who he actually is. Like, I just really want to know who Michael Jordan actually is today, because I don't think that we have that. So with that being said, anybody want to offer some final thoughts before we call it a night?
This was fun, guys. This was fun. I really, really, really appreciate you guys joining us, man. It's good to kind of, you know what, man, because none of us are going to sleep in the first hour after that anyway, right? Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be honest, man. We've been looking forward to that the whole week. We're all amped up. You know, you feel like you could play 48 minutes after watching those 2 hours, right? So appreciate you guys kind of breaking it down with us, man. It was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it. I don't know if you were watching the commercials, but they did a preview for some of the upcoming 30 for 30s that were coming out. And there's one with Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa.
Yeah. And that's going to be Chicks Dig the Long Ball, man. That was amazing. That was amazing. And you wonder, like, was it worth it, right? The steroid use and everything. Can you go back and remember how fun that was and say, you know what? The steroids were worth it. I don't know.
Look,
you know? It's a really interesting topic.
And you know, like, I'm not the biggest baseball fan. I tell you frequently.
Sure.
But that's when I loved baseball, and I think it'd be super cool for you guys to, like, continue this the ESPN Upstate tweet while you watch a 30 for 30, and then even do one of these, because, like, after each thing, especially if sports isn't coming back anytime soon. Because I had a blast doing this with you guys, and I love just interacting because you are the most interactive sports show, Mark, and just station. So I had a blast doing this. So thank you.
Rob, thanks for setting this up, man. Really, really good idea, man. A lot of fun.
My pleasure. Yeah. Chris, thanks very much, man.
Absolutely. I think this is great. It's great content. It's great. This is what we need right now. This is I get a live UFC fight with no fans and Joe Rogan cheering on nobody. And outside of that, I'm watching reruns teams that will not be named, Clemson, go on to win national titles, you name it. But this is what we need more of, is just some wholesome sports talk. Little debate here and there doesn't hurt, but kudos to you, Rob, Mark, for setting this up. I think these are the kind of things that push that needle even further forward for the station, for Greenville. And I really hope this is something that is done even once sports are back. This is great.
You got it, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us, Keegan, Chris, and, of course, Marc Ryan. His show, Offsides with Marc Ryan and Lonzo, every day on ESPN Upstate from 3 to 7. My name is Rob Brown. The Rob Brown Show's on from 12 to noon. Look, I have a –
Wait a minute. 12 to noon. That's a short show, man.
12 to noon, yeah.
12 to noon.
Some people wish it was 12 to noon. Let's go 12
Bye-bye.
I was so excited to point out the banner that I forgot how time works. But anyway – tell your Alexa to play ESPN Upstate. She'll do it. Otherwise, you can find us right there on the radio dial. For Marc Ryan, Keegan, Chris, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll talk to you down the road. Have a good night.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys.